Good evening and welcome once again to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. We are coming to you live from the gun store here in Las Vegas. We are on KSHP 1400 radio AM, as you're aware if you're listening in your car. And we're on YouTube at Fired Up with Bob Irwin. The shows appear regularly from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. every Thursday. If you miss anything on the radio portion because you're driving and you're not supposed to be paying attention to the radio, you can look at the YouTube version. It stays up forever and ever. There's 3 or 4 years of shows on there. That is Fired Up with Bob Irwin on the YouTube channel. Tonight's guest is my friend, homicide detective Phil Ramos, with us once again, retired from LVMPD. A little bit of your background, Phil, for new guys out there.
Well, I did about 33 years at Metro. My last 12 were in homicide. I've handled about 340 homicides, about the same number of suicides, and about 50 officer-involved shootings. Been retired for a few years, and I do a little bit of private work on the side, but mostly I just take my time and come down here to visit with Bob.
This is his full-time job, an hour a week. Yeah. Actually, Phil does work for attorneys now looking into death cases where they're not sure everything was done properly or handled properly, or they've got a dead-end case. Great investigator, got a resume that would knock your socks off. So if you got some death in the family you're concerned about, you can get a hold of him by dropping a note to our website, bob@firedupmail.com. Send me an email and I will forward it to Phil so he can look into the case for your attorney or for you and see what happened. We talked generally in the beginning of this show about defensive use of firearms. There are several hundred cases every week, obviously, in the United States. So we pick out some that seem to have teachable moments in them, if you will, and not to second guess the individuals involved, but to look at what happened and maybe we could have made it a little better, a better warning would have helped, or the guy did exactly the right thing. They're all food for thought. Some are good, some are bad. Once in a while there's one that's just stupid or wrong, but they all have useful information. And the idea is, for the listeners, you can put yourself in the position the guy was in and think about what you would have done. And it's easy in 2020 hindsight to second guess people in these fluid situations. So that's really not what we're doing. We don't use their names generally. But so you can think about what you would do if you were caught in that type of situation, because these things happen really suddenly most times. Local News 4 called Click on Detroit, it's obviously in Detroit, Michigan, reported on the 24th, a little bit ago, police say a driver of a white van followed a guy driving a Dodge Challenger until it stopped at a liquor store on West 7 Mile Road and Hayden Street, if you know where that is. The driver of the van apparently waited for the customer to exit the liquor store and then approached his intended victim with a gun in what was apparently an attempted carjacking. Unfortunately for the would-be criminal, the targeted driver, I got to change that because this turned out to be wrong after I pulled it up again. The targeted driver actually, I'm looking at the wrong case. Anyway, carjacking. Wow, I'm going to mess up this broadcast. Anyway, the would-be criminal, the targeted driver had a concealed carry license. Given the bad guy's close proximity, the Dodge driver grabbed the barrel of the carjacker's gun. He then pulled out his own gun and fired 10 rounds at the carjacker. The suspect backed away, fired 4 or 5 shots back at the victim. According to investigators, they're still searching for that suspect. There's a second one here that I wanted to put in. Here we have a guy who gets an attempted carjacking and he fires 10 shots at the guy. That seems like a little bit of, why are you doing that? That same evening, Detroit police were investigating another carjacking that left a 24-year-old guy dead. These were 4 people were carjacked around 2:30 a.m. In a 2007 Chrysler Sebring. Responding police were flagged down by bystanders because as they were going to the scene, there was a body in the road. So they stopped there. It turned out that was one of the 4 people that had been in this Sebring when it was carjacked. And apparently the carjackers shot this guy for no apparent reason. He was shot in the back several times and killed. Knowing that kind of thing is going on, it helps you understand why the first driver would fire 10 shots. Obviously, his guy fired back at him. There was an interview with an Uber driver unrelated to this, but the press interviewed the guy when they stopped him and asked about these problems. And he said that it's not safe to stop after dark at any store or gas station in most parts of Detroit after dark. I mean, in the second story, near the second carjacking, we're looking at murdering a guy, shooting him in the back over a 10-year-old used car.
Yeah, and we see people getting killed over senseless reasons all the time, but this ranks right up there. I think the story here, though, Bob, is the first incident when the intended victim pulled his own gun and was in what seems to be a close quarters combat situation with the carjacker, and he fired 10 rounds. It's a lot of rounds to fire at close quarters and not hit the guy. So that's why we always say, once you get your CCW, practice, practice, practice. Don't just put it away, put it under the bed or in the nightstand, and don't shoot it again, because there's going to come a time when you need it, and you doggone well better be able to shoot that thing, make it an extension of your hand, and hit what you're aiming at, because a lot of this could have been avoided, and this bad guy could have met with some swift justice had any of those 10 rounds hit where they intended to hit, but it didn't. And
it's just fortunate for the motorist that the bad guy was as bad a shot as he was.
Yeah.
Because if he'd messed with all his 10 and then the other guy just carefully aims and shoots and kills him, that would have been. Right. They both couldn't shoot. So, and fortunately in this incident, we got 14 rounds flying down the street multi directions, and nobody else got
hit. Yeah, of course, it could have been nobody else out at night taking the Uber driver's advice: don't stop anywhere in certain parts of Detroit after the sun goes down.
Or when the round started, everybody ducked. And this is another always carry your gun story. If you got a permit, carry it. People talk to us all the time about, well, I only carry my gun if I'm going someplace dangerous. You're always going someplace dangerous because the bad guy finds you. Reminder, we teach a free concealed carry permit class here at the gun store every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, 3 classes a week. Go to thegunstorelasvegas.com and you can sign up for them and learn about this kind of stuff so you don't get hurt. This is just a kind of a fun story. This is KMOV TV4 in St. Louis. On the 24th in Hillsborough, a suburb apparently of St. Louis. Early in the morning on July 17, a 77-year-old woman heard a noise in her house in the Rock Creek Road and Highway 30, if you know where that is. So she grabbed her shotgun and went back to the area where she heard the noise. She discovered 2 individuals in one of her spare bedrooms. The burglars found themselves staring down the barrel of a shotgun held by the elderly woman. When the suspects saw the gun, they jumped out a bathroom window they used to get into the house. An 87-year-old neighbor and friend of the victim came over to help after this. She said to the press, she had a message for criminals. Don't come back, because that victim is not the only senior citizen in the neighborhood with a gun. Detective Sergeant with the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department said the 2 bad guys are lucky to be alive to tell about it. He added the Sheriff's Department would prefer you call 911 when you hear an intruder and leave the work to the professionals. But the department also mentioned they acknowledge that the women have a right to protect themselves. In their panicked retreat, when the 77-year-old lady points her shotgun, the burglars dropped their burglary tools and a cell phone. On the cell phone, the investigators have been able to identify the guy, and they're finding him now. I just love this. An elderly lady with a shotgun chases off burglars. You got to love it. And imagine these jerks trying to explain to their cellmates how they ended up in jail. They'll probably have a better story than a 77-year-old chased them out of the house with a gun.
And you know, I don't know anybody who wears a badge that isn't under their breath going to say, "Good for you, Grandma. That's what you do." But in this day and age of political correctness and everybody, you know, trying to cover their you-know-what, department officials have to say, call 911 first. Don't take the law into your own hands. Let the cops come out and handle the danger. Don't put yourself in danger. And you know, 99% of the time, that's exactly what you want to do and what you would like to do. But there's going to be that 1% of the time when you are not able to do that and you have to defend yourself and take action. Good for her. Good for her.
She did great. And as Phil said, of course, the sheriff's right. You should call 911 and hide or get out of the house. This worked. I love it. So mentioning that, we do run a ladies only shooting and personal safety class here twice a month. Our lady instructor for it, Maggie Mordaunt, actually the class is on Thursdays, every other Thursday, second and fourth Thursday. And the here at the gun store, you can sign up again on our website. This class is not free, but it is taught by this really wonderfully renowned instructor, lady instructor. You get a lot out of it. I would strongly suggest taking her class when it's available on our website, thegunstorelasvegas.com, lady self-defense class. The Alaska Native News reports, this was all over the media in Alaska. That's just the one I picked out to use as the basis. This is in Palmer, Alaska. Alaska State Troopers responded to a home invasion in the Plumley Road area at 1:16 a.m. on Thursday morning. When troopers arrived and conducted their investigation, they found that two suspects, unknown to the homeowner, entered the residence through a window. According to the report, the homeowner confronted the two suspects with a firearm, but they fired first, striking him in the arm. The homeowner then shot his own gun, but it is unclear if either suspect was injured. As soon as the gunfire started, both suspects then fled the scene. A second person in the residence at the time was uninjured. The homeowner's identity was not divulged. He was transported to Matsu Regional Medical Center for treatment of his wound. The Wasilla Police Department also responded to the scene with a canine unit, but they ultimately were unsuccessful in tracking the suspect. Palmer and Anchorage, Alaska Bureau of Investigation investigators came and were continuing the investigation. Charges in the incident are expected to be felony assault and attempted murder, among other things. One of the reasons that I always advocate use of warnings if possible, but you do that from a position of cover. Sometimes the bad guys, they're there, they've already got their guns out. You have to understand human reaction, even if you're caught in the open here with multiple intruders. Obviously, you fire at them, they're going to fire back. I mean, this isn't the movies where people suddenly just fall completely dead. They don't, unless they're hitting the brainstem or a very small area of their heart. They're going to continue to fire back, and they're standing right in front of you with their gun out. This is how this guy got shot. So, you're not going to have a discussion in the warning by asking him, why are you in my house at 1 o'clock in the morning? You got two guys there with guns. You don't need to be getting into a long drawn-out conversation. Yeah. Get out or I'll shoot is about all you need, or I have a gun, go away. First consideration in gunfights is winning, which means you don't get hit. So first, if possible, get to cover, then challenge. This is a very lucky resident that he lived to tell the tale, just got shot in the arm.
Yeah, and this is a good example of previous story why we made a comment about the police always encouraging you to call 911 first, retreat if you can, and take a defensive position, or don't be the aggressor when, even though you're armed and you've got individuals in your house, if there's a way out, take it. this is why they give you that advice, because you don't know if the bad guys are armed. You don't know how bad these bad guys are, and how willing they are going to be to shoot at you the minute you confront them. So in this case, it worked out good for the most part.
Almost good.
Yeah, almost good. I mean, the victim was injured, but could have been much worse. On the other hand, it could have been much worse for the bad guys as well. So it's just such a judgment call, man. We like to tell people, don't shoot unless you absolutely have to, but there's going to be exceptions to that case all the time.
Yep.
We like to tell people, withdraw, call 911 if you can. There's going to be exceptions to that all the time. You just have to revert back to your instincts and to your CCW training to fire that weapon when you think you absolutely have to.
If your life is actually on the line,
Yeah.
you need to shoot right then.
Yeah.
You know, worry about all the other stuff later. We got lots of defense lawyers. We got expert witnesses. Everything is going to help you. But first, you got to be alive. So first rule is don't die. All the other rules,
Right.
follow that. You got to be alive. If you're planning to have a corporate event, we do machine gun shooting things here at the gun store, our main business. And you can call Melissa or contact Melissa at thegunstorelasvegas.com, and she'll set up your group for a corporate event or weddings we do and so forth and so on. It's a lot of fun. It's the people coming out of our ranges are just grinning ear to ear all the time. Let's see. I'm going to skip that one for now. I'm going to skip that one completely. I got a couple here that I wrote them out, and they're so complicated. It's hard to explain it in what we have on the TV show. These cases I also put on the internet at ammoland.com. They run one of these for me almost every day, and there's a little more explanation to it and so forth. And then you can write and make comments and whatever, and we read all that stuff. Even when you say that Irwin's really a jerk, you don't know what he's talking about. Got a few of those too. Probably my ex-wife under an assumed name. This is a good story and a bad story. WMBF NBC Cable, Channel 32 in Loris, South Carolina. A home invasion happened Sunday around 9 p.m. A 75-year-old woman and a 78-year-old male neighbor were in her home when apparently the door wasn't locked and the front door wasn't locked, and a younger couple rushed inside. They handcuffed her and other family members. She had some grandchildren there. The 70-year-old neighbor tried to fight with them, but he was severely beaten by the male suspect. They started yelling, "Where's your pocketbook? Where are your pills?" The male suspect used a stun gun on the woman several times and hit her in the head with his pistol. All the while, the female suspect was rummaging through the house. The male suspect ultimately pushed the elderly woman to the floor. He got distracted apparently at that moment. She managed to get up and into the bedroom where she keeps her gun. She came out armed, shot the male suspect, didn't warn him first. Great. This is not the time. We're beyond warnings here. She came out, shot the guy. He fell back against the refrigerator. He recovered his balance. The woman came running out of the back of the house, and both of them ran out the door. The woman reported the home had been robbed previously. It happened about a year ago. Robbers at that point, impersonating police officers, pretended to be serving a warrant for one of her daughters. When she opened the door, they shoved her in the door, tied her up, and again, at gunpoint, demanded money and her prescription pills. There wasn't anything in the police report I could find about whether the first guys that did this were caught. The woman's 9-year-old foster daughter and infant great-granddaughter were at home when this occurred. Now she's installing surveillance cameras inside and outside her home. The Horry County Police Department is actively investigating the case, and they, at last writing, they had some leads because these guys left a lot of physical evidence when they ran. Soft targets. This is elderly victims being attacked, so far at least twice. The second time, having a gun literally saved their lives. Drug robberies are common in older folks. I can attest to that. You usually have lots of prescriptions,
Mm-hmm.
and they're a soft target because we're a little older, a little slower, a little nicer. When people knock at the door and ask for help, they tend to open the door. This lady is absolutely lucky to have survived without life-threatening injuries. If you pull this up, this is Loris, L-O-R-I-S, South Carolina. You pull it up on the internet. This is a lady who is in no condition to be fighting with anybody.
Right.
And
I think one of the issues here is the previous incident of a year ago where somebody impersonated a police officer and pretending to serve a search warrant on her daughter. There's a story there for some reason.
yeah,
It's not very often, and you're right. I mean, the majority of crimes are committed by people looking for money and stuff like that to support their drug habit. But it's very rare, in my experience, to have somebody come in and announce, "Where's your pills? Where are your prescription meds?" and stuff like that. So
twice. It makes
Twice,
you think
yeah.
they're related.
yeah, I would bet that there's some nexus between the daughter pretending and then bad guys pretending to serve a search warrant. There's probably well known that the senior citizens in this case have a substantial amount of pain medication, I would guess, and that was why all of this started in the first place. So the lesson there is if you're a senior and you're on pain medication, keep it a secret to yourself, especially if you've got younger generation people living with you, because it's such an issue. I mean, there's probably one of the biggest problems that we're facing in society today is this pain pill addiction that everybody is suffering through. It affects everybody, just about everybody in the U.S. And so if you're legitimately taking pain pills and you're a senior citizen, keep it to yourself. Keep it a secret. Don't publicize that, especially to younger family members.
Really good advice. And the other thing I'd look at here, is this is the second time it happened, and now she's installing cameras. Cameras work. They deter people dramatically.
Yes, they do.
Particularly if you make sure the recording is off premise. It's at your neighbor's house or an alarm company has it. They'll virtually know they can't get away with it when they see the cameras, and they'll pick a house that doesn't have cameras. Try to avoid the fake ones. Most of the bad guys can tell fake cameras from real cameras. But it took her the lesson of this being the second time. What this will cost her in medical bills and damage and injuries and pain and suffering will be way more than the cost of those cameras.
Yes,
Get the cameras. They really work. The alarm systems work. Cameras work because they deter most of the common smash and grab guys. And good advice. She had a gun, and this time it saved her. So that's a good thing. Always have a gun. That's important. This is cool. This is WPVI TV6, mostly ABC. This was carried by all three major networks on the 26th in the Winfield section of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At 5:15 a.m., a worker had just left his maintenance job at a Gulf station in the 2200 block of Bryan Marr Avenue, if you know where that is in Philly. He gone out to his car, realized he left his coffee on the counter. It's a convenience store and garage where they fix cars. It would be a slot machine parlor if it was here in Las Vegas. Anyway, he realized he left his coffee, so he ran back in to get his coffee and ran back out, leaving his car unlocked because he'd already unlocked it when he went back to get his coffee. So he returns, and there's a guy sitting in the back seat with a gun. Told him to get in. Well, he was smart enough. He didn't get in. He just slammed the door and ran. Apparently, the guy sitting in the back seat didn't have a good angle to fire at him, or decided not to. But he just ducked and ran back into the 7-Eleven to call 911. Witnesses there. Now, they hear the guy yell, and the car door slam, and everybody's looking over, and they saw the suspect jump out of the car and run. But he only ran about half a block where he approached another guy who had just bought a bag of potato chips at the same gas station. He's walking back to his car with his bag of potato chips. So the witnesses, they saw the guy run by, they saw him run toward this guy, and then they hear shots. Bear in mind, it's 5 a.m. It's probably pretty dark out. They hear shots, but it wasn't the suspect that fired. It was the guy that he was trying to rob. The second guy, he had a CCW. He drew his gun and fired at the guy when the guy ran up and to steal his money or potato chips or whatever. He was on foot, so he wasn't another carjacking. He was headed back to his car. Anyway, he drew his gun, fired several shots. He hit the robber, the first one tonight. He hit the robber several times in the back, in the abdomen, in the back, and in the hand. He was transported to a hospital for surgery. He's listed in critical condition when this was written. At this point, the investigators believe the shooting is justified. They have recovered the criminal's gun, which was not fired, but he had a gun. He did have a gun, clearly. They say the man who fired his weapon remained on the scene, turned over his gun, and cooperated with police. Perfect. So this was not a good night for the robber. First, he picks the wrong target twice in a row. The first guy just ignores him and runs. And the second guy draws a gun. Now, drawing a gun, there's a lesson here I want to talk about before Phil talks about the case. But drawing a gun on somebody who's pointing a gun at you is a little dicey.
It is.
I can tell you from experience, in general, the guy pointing a gun does not expect you to draw a gun. So it will take him about 1.5 seconds to realize you're drawing a gun. In that time, you should have already fired 2 or 3 rounds.
Yes.
But his brain is still going, oh, damn, the guy's got a gun, rather than just pulling the trigger. So you've got a little time gap there where you can fire, but bear in mind, being hit by a pistol bullet doesn't kill you instantly, like we just talked about. His usual reaction when you suddenly shoot is to pull the trigger. He tenses up, pulls the trigger, and it's a little disorienting. It's not going to improve his marksmanship when he's got a bullet in him.
No.
But if you're close, that's a pretty dicey thing to do. And it only works if you have practiced.
Yes.
Getting your gun, your coat out of the way, getting your gun from a snapped holster position like you're carrying it smoothly. Practice, practice, practice. If you don't, and you flub up your draw when the guy's pointing a gun at you, you're going to get killed.
There are a number of things could happen. You can drop the gun. You can fire it prematurely. You can not even have your finger on the trigger. You just, if you don't practice. We harp all the time, practice, 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 but practice carrying your gun the way you're going to carry it out in public and draw that gun the way you're going to have to react to a situation like this. I mean, this all worked out. Great shoot on the victim's part. The one question I have is, do you suppose he dropped his bag of potato chips before he shot him?
Depends how hungry he was.
Yeah. So
it's funny, people tend to hold on to those things. They don't.
Especially if they were Cheetos. I'd hold on to my Cheetos.
This again, we've got an argument here at the end, maybe from the family, that the guy fired 4 shots, or hit the guy 4 times. We may have fired more. As I talked about earlier, the guy isn't going to drop dead when you let go of the first round. You need to shoot people until they're no longer a threat. That tends to cause lawsuits later on because the family will not agree that that was a reasonable thing to do.
Right.
It is a reasonable thing to do, and that's why they make expert witnesses and homicide investigators to look at this and go, yeah, I'd have done the same thing. The guy is, you don't even realize he's down. I've had students just under the stress of qualification in a police academy, and the target paper came loose from the wind, and the guy's firing a string, and he just follows it across the range and shooting. He didn't even realize the target's moving. He's no longer pointing his gun down range. He's pointing it sideways because you're so concentrating, you don't know the guy's down. And one other note on this one, when you leave your car just for a minute, lock it. You don't want to find somebody in the back seat with a gun when you get there.
And it doesn't matter what time of day it is either. That advice is 24 hours a day.
I couldn't tell you how many, well, you could probably tell me how many cars are stolen in front of 7-Elevens because they leave them unlocked, or worse, in the summer, they leave them unlocked and running.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I'm only running in there for a minute, and there's somebody standing around a 7-Eleven, or by brand name, that sees that and go, look, a free car, and they weren't planning to steal it, but you handed it to them.
And going back to the number of shots fired just for a second, police officers are trained to shoot until the threat is over, until you no longer feel threatened. There have been many, many shootings that I've investigated, officer-involved shootings that I've investigated, where the threat continued after the suspect was shot and was still on the ground, because the shots that took him to the ground weren't immediately fatal or weren't disabling enough to the point where he stopped his aggressive actions. I've seen plenty of shootings where suspects are on the ground, shot 2 or 3 times by police officers, and they still have their hand on their gun or their weapon, or still in an aggressive mode. And that's why officers will shoot someone while they're still on the ground. You shoot until the threat is over. Now, officers are held to a higher standard than the general citizen, so officers have to be able to articulate that the reason they kept shooting is because the threat was still present. Citizens don't necessarily have to meet that burden. They can just keep shooting until they feel safe in themselves. So that doesn't mean empty your magazine if you don't have to. That just means once you're convinced that that threat is over, then you can stop firing. But when people argue, well, why did they have to shoot him 112 times? It's because 10 officers fired at the same time, and that's a little bit of an exaggeration. But you shoot until the threat is over. You never know when that threat's going to be over until you have eyes on the suspect, and the threat that caused you to shoot is no longer present.
And that's the problem we get in a lot of times in police shootings.
Yes.
And if you want to take a shot at these two, well, I asked Phil to look at a couple of police shootings. I mentioned these a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and I kind of wanted to get his take on it. 2 of the recent shootings, one in Baton Rouge, a guy named Alton Sterling, who was allegedly selling video discs, CDs, outside of a convenience store. We've got video of the shooting, and what I want to explain here is we're looking at the shooting, the actual 2 seconds, 1.5 seconds of the confrontation, not what the officer's previous history or training was, not what the shot person, what their criminal history was. All of that wasn't known to anybody involved at the time. It may count later in a civil lawsuit, but it doesn't mean anything for looking at, was the shooting reasonable? Was it a murder? Was it an accident? Was. This Mr. Sterling was selling CDs. They had a call that there was an armed guy there or something. They knew from information that he was armed, and he was armed. There's a scuffle. You can see the 2 officers are down on the ground with him. One's basically around his feet, and he's fighting with that guy. The officer that shot him, you can see in the video, he draws his Glock, places it, it looks like he actually touches the guy's chest with it, and then pulls it up and fires it. That's an indicator to me as a trainer. When we teach people about tasers work better if the darts are apart. They separate from each other in the body. If you use it in stun mode, where you just touch the guy with a taser and the probes are only a half-inch apart, it's way less effective in stunning the guy so he quits fighting. So it appears that what the officer thought, he had his taser. When you watch the tape, most of the news media cut off just as he starts to move the gun. Because they don't want to show the bullet going into the guy, but if you get one of the originals, you can see he's moving his hand back to about here as he pulls the trigger. That's typical of an officer who thinks he's got his taser. I'm not telling you the officer was right. That was clearly an error on the part of the officer, just this little portion. Now, again, I'm not getting into how the officers got there. It appears to be an accidental shooting. He simply thought he had a different weapon in his hand. Mm-hmm. And there may be a training problem with that. There may be a lot of things going on. But in my opinion, it was a mistake, not a murder.
And the video itself, you know, the outlets always put up that disclaimer, this is a very disturbing and graphic video, just as a warning for people. But I've seen that video many, many times, and there's nothing graphic about it. When the only thing that you see is officer pulling his gun, and you might see a little bit of a recoil, but there's no blood and guts on it. You don't see blood erupting from the man's chest, and you don't see something that's terribly graphic and disturbing. You can't even actually see where the bullet struck the man in the body and blood coming out. You don't see that. So for those of you who want to watch it and you know, discern your own opinion from that, you're not going to see a whole lot of disturbing or graphic stuff on that video. You don't actually see where the bullet strikes and blood coming out of the victim. You know, what I would consider graphic or disturbing. But
in the defense of the network, you're a homicide detective. Yeah. What is graphic and disturbing to the general public is not what's graphic and disturbing to you.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
It's the second one is in Minnesota, St. Paul, I believe. We have a guy in a car. He's a concealed weapon holder. His girlfriend made a video right after the shooting, showing, you know, the officer coming up with his gun and so forth. The guy had a gun on him. She had her earphones in. There is no audio on this one that I'm aware of. I've seen it several times and I don't know, there is no audio. The individual officer's attorney said that the guy had a gun, it was visible. He was yelling at him, don't touch the gun, and he continued to reach for it, and the officer fired. The girlfriend says the guy was reaching for his ID. That may be true. If you are stopped by the police, you have no idea why you're being stopped.
Right.
Don't reach toward a gun. The officer has no idea. That one, in my diagnosis of the 1.5 seconds, it's a little longer in this one. It's probably about 2.5 seconds total. If he's a trained CCW holder, he should know to obey the officer's commands. They have no idea who you are, how you got there. Reaching toward a gun.
And you don't know why you're being
suicide.
Stopped. Yeah. You don't know why you're being stopped. You know, the best advice that any officer will give you is keep your hands on the steering wheel so that the officer can see where your hands are. You know, the average law-abiding citizen is going to think, oh, shoot, I better get out my driver's license and registration right now. Well, where do you carry your driver's license? In your back pocket. Where do most people carry their guns? In their waistband. Where do you carry your registration? In the glove box. Where do other people carry guns? In the glove box. When you're reaching for your driver's license, that could very easily be mistaken by the officer that you're reaching for something that he can't see, and it could be a weapon that's going to harm him. When you're reaching in the glove box or under the seat, you could very well be reaching for something that's going to harm the officer. Keep your hands on the steering wheel, or at least where the officer can see them, until the officer tells you to do something else. don't hide your hands from the officer, because that's just going to put him on alert, and anything you do is going to put yourself in danger. As innocent as it might be to you, it could be a sign of danger to the officer.
Again, we're looking at these from a training perspective and investigative. You know, it's unfortunate that either one of these guys lost their life. Particularly the second one, who apparently just made an error in reacting how the police react. I've been stopped several times over my career of erratic driving by the police, and know that. You know, hands on the dashboard.
Yeah.
The officer walking up will immediately know that you're either a cop or a CCW holder or a multiple felon. They're the only three groups that put their hands on the dashboard. All the rest of them don't know to do that. If you take CCW class, we tell you to put them on the steering wheel in plain view. And then everybody relaxes. If it's night, flip on the interior light so they could see what's in the car. You know, think of it from the officer's perspective. You have no idea what he's thinking, why he's stopping your car, especially if you have no reason to be stopped. Those are the worst ones of all. You weren't speeding. He's looking for somebody that has a car just like yours. So
yeah. And then the Minnesota case on the car that was being pulled over, the very first reports were that they were being stopped because they had a broken tail light or they didn't use their turn signal to make a turn, which turned out to be completely erroneous. It was later released on the officer's dash cam in his video. The reason he was stopping them is because they matched the description of two robbery suspects that had just committed a violent crime, and that's why he was stopping them. It had nothing to do with the turn signal or broken taillight. So, you know, the lesson here, and we pontificate about it all the time, is wait till all the evidence comes in. Don't judge these officers by the very first thing you see on TV in somebody's YouTube account of what the traffic stop was for, what they were doing at the time they were shot. You got to take into consideration what was happening for those 2 or 3 minutes before the shooting occurred.
Yeah, there's always way more information, and I'm sure you all have noticed watching news media reports of shootings or almost anything. The first reports are always wrong. There's no point to listen, to the news. It's, this guy wasn't from ISIS, and this was workplace violence, and all this crap that you get from various news media. A little note on the political front. If you didn't notice, Hillary Clinton, my favorite anti-gun politician, has picked Tim Kaine, ex-governor of Virginia, and did some time in the Senate as her vice president. She'll pick. There's a lot of stuff coming out on blogs, but in case you don't know, he has 100% positive rating from the Brady campaign as being for all the gun laws you could possibly be for, and an F grade from the NRA for consistently voting to take guns away from honest people, I guess. There's a lot of details, and if you follow the blogs, there's all sorts of stuff. Again, the story you hear initially is probably wrong.
Right.
It's wrong about the bad guys too. When you get the full dope, we've got all kinds of time before the election to discover whether Hillary's really serious about taking assault rifles away from everybody in her first 100 days in office. We will see. A couple of notes, and then I'll go back to another story. I'm running out of time and don't get this stuff in. The Western Trails Gun Show, August 6 and 7, Saturday and Sunday, the East Side Cannery. It's at Boulder Highway and Russell Road. It's easy to get to. They have free parking. It's actually free parking. There's another gun show that had free parking and it wasn't when you got there. The people that owned the parking lot were charging you. They agreed not to, and they were. The one up here on Sunset. But anyway, the Western Trails one, it is free because it's in the Cannery Casino. Nice little show, not a giant show, but a nice show. After that, a week and a half. We have Crossroads of the West is going to be down at Cashman Field. That is a major show. Everybody will be there. I'll be at the Eastside Cannery at the NRA table for a little bit. If you want to talk about something on Saturday, I try to be there from 11 to 1 or so. So you can ask questions that you don't want to ask by writing an email. The Crossroads of the West, we will actually have a table there selling our brass and so forth, which will be manned by me for a while. I do have a bunch of passes for the Crossroads Gun Show. If you would like to drop me an email to that bob@firedupmail.com, just requesting a pass for the show, I will get one to you. We need your first name and your telephone number so we can contact you to find out how to get it to you. So it's a big show. It's $12 or $15 to get in. So those are, these are free passes.
It's a big show too.
It's
a really big show.
So get one. I've got a stack about, probably 30, 40 of them. And they will go out to the first people who send me an email, bob@firedupmail.com. We'll be back next Tuesday. I've never changed this out. It's Thursday now, Bob. We'll be back next Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m. at 1400 AM radio. My guest will be Maggie Mordaunt, the lady who teaches our lady self-defense classes. We'll be back on YouTube at the same time, 5 to 6 p.m. Again, questions and comments to bob@firedupmail. And you can watch the shows for years back at Fired Up with Bob Irwin on Facebook. I mentioned one more time, we do free concealed carry permit classes also 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. You only have to go to one of them. It's an all-day class. If you're renewing, it's the first half of the class, about 9 to 2 right now it takes us to get out. A couple of other notes. We did a story a couple of weeks ago. The Oregonian has done a follow-up. There was a lady who had her house broken into. She came home with her 10-year-old daughter and her 5-year-old son from work. She's coming into the house at 1:45 a.m. This is back on June 26th. She heard a noise. She got her gun and went back into what was the daughter's bedroom that was unoccupied at the time, discovered a 59-year-old male standing in the room, and she fired. This was, and shot him in the chest. This was a death. It was investigated now. The police department there in Portland sent it over to the grand jury. She was exonerated from doing anything criminal. The grand jury gave her a clean bill, no bill attached. So there was some question about it because it turned out the 59-year-old intruder had no real criminal history. He had a mental history. He was pretty goofy, been under care for some time. They have no idea why he broke into her house. He had no history of being a child molester or a burglar or anything. He just wandered away from wherever he was staying and for whatever reason broke into her house. He was under psychiatric care at the time and on several drugs to control that. Sometimes you don't know, and it turns out to be a really sorrowful shooting because the guy was really just goofy.
And you know that drives home a point that citizens as well as police officers never know who they're dealing with when they have a situation like this. Let's say that this guy was a pedophile and that he was there to do harm to those two little children. Either way, the fact that the mother, Mama Bear reacted the way Mama Bear is going to react, and it's a tragedy that the man was mentally disabled and that he likely was not there to cause any harm. But who knew that? This lady didn't know that. Responding police officers would not have known that. All they know is that there's a stranger in the bedroom late at night with two little kids there. So it's tragic that the man lost his life and that this woman had to do what she had to do to defend herself, but she was completely justified in my mind as an investigator of cases like this. would have never considered issuing charges or requesting charges from the DA in a situation like this.
Well, the police backed away from it almost immediately and sent it to the grand jury. The DA looked at it and went, "Yeah, I don't know what to do with this." So that's what you do. You send it to a grand jury where you have, I don't know how many they use in Oregon. Here you have 15 or 18 people that'll listen to testimony about it and what happened and why, and they either issue an indictment, then you get arrested and go to trial, or they don't. And that was a good shooting to have a grand jury look at it. You can be sure that the family, well, you can't be sure, we don't know, but the family of the guy who was killed would certainly not be thrilled.
No.
But I think their anger would be directed at the assisted living thing he was living at, where he wandered away. And it didn't detail in the article whether they were looking for him or they even knew he was gone. We don't know how he wandered away, but he wasn't a prisoner. So,
and not only that, I can almost guarantee you that there is nobody more grieved in this situation than the woman who took this man's life.
absolutely. Especially when you find that he wasn't a bad guy.
Right.
You just, oh my God.
Right, exactly.
Why we use warnings if you can in this case, I don't see how you would get, what would you do? You walk in and there's the guy standing in your daughter's bedroom. It's 1:45 a.m.
Yeah. Of
course she fired her gun. As I said earlier, you can't be negotiating with somebody, why are you in my house at 1 o'clock in the morning? Danger is there. He's an adult male, right? He can probably take the gun away from you and you're stuck. So better idea, maybe, would be to call the police. Say, I heard a noise in my house. Are they going to respond to that? It depends how busy they are.
Well, they're never going to get there faster than you can go into
To look.
to the room and investigate it yourself. And once you see the situation, then things are going to happen the way they're going to happen.
In the military, you just throw a grenade in the room. But you don't have to go look. But we're not allowed to do that at the moment. Anyway, I appreciate you all tuning in to Fired Up. I'm not going to try and get into another story. I will again mention, if I may, we're going to be at the Western Trails Gun Show at the Cannery Hotel on Boulder Highway and Russell, August 6th and 7th. I'll be there on the 6th, Saturday, and we will be there in force at the Crossroads Show, August 13 and 14. Please do send me an email to get your passes. I've got some free passes. We also, these stores are carried on MLN.com and a couple of other websites, actually, we picked up now. Sometimes the ones I don't get to, we put on the internet anyway on MLN sites. So there's more stuff that appears on the air. And vote no on one. The left is trying to take your guns, and you will be on Hillary's list if we have universal registration. It will not help reduce crime. It will help reduce good citizens having guns. The state of Nevada currently is charging $25 to run the background check. So that's my main argument with the background check, is it makes it cost money and it forces people to buy guns on the street for economic reasons. And you shouldn't be charged to exercise a constitutional right.
Just to make a point about that, I was doing an interview a few weeks ago with an author that was writing a book on self-defense. And it occurred to me while we were talking about this, in the 300 plus murders that I investigated that involved handguns, I never once investigated a murder where the gun that was used was registered to the owner or the shooter in that incident. Not once. So registering guns or not registering guns is not going to make one modicum of difference in the crime rate. Not one.
They're lying. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week. We got Maggie Mordaunt on next week. Don't miss it. Thanks for listening.
Bye.